Okay, so let's go on to lesson 2 of chapter 3. There's a couple of key words you guys need to know here. One of them is stock company, and the other one is investor. An investor is someone who gives money to a company hoping to get something out of it, usually profit. So like if you invest money in a company, you give that company a little bit of money, you get a small piece of that company. And when that company grows, you hopefully get something back, something out of it. The Plymouth Company was one of these companies, and they were trying to make some money off of America. They had this thing called a charter that set up them, and they were given the right to settle in Virginia. They actually ended up settling in New England, and they were not ready. They did not plan for this, and they came all the way over here thinking they were just going to wing it, but they end up struggling, and most of them have to return to England and quit because their trip coming to America is a failure. So, who were the Pilgrims? The Pilgrims were a group of people that were unhappy with a couple of different things. They didn't have true freedom of religion like we actually do in America. Religious problems are happening when the King of England is being very strict about what religion you must be. He was unhappy with a group of people called the Separatists or the Pilgrims because they were a different type of Christian than he was. And they had an official church in England, the Church of England, that you had to be part of. And they did not want to be part of that church. They didn't want to pay taxes to that church. They wanted to be free to worship the way they pleased. So they wanted to separate from the Church of England, and King James decides he's going to punish them. If they're not going to follow the religion, they're going to be persecuted. They're going to be arrested. They're going to be put in jail. Many of them said they don't want that, so they fled. They went to Western Europe and Holland, and the problem is, it was a completely different place. That would be like getting dropped off tomorrow in China. It would be difficult for me because I don't speak Chinese. I don't know how anything works. I wouldn't be able to do it. So when these people ran to Holland, they're in a new place with new customs, new language. They felt out of place. So they didn't know what was going on. They wanted to move somewhere else and start their own colony. They wanted to come to America, but the ships were super expensive, and paying for a boat to bring all these people on a 3-month-long voyage to come to America costs a huge amount of money that they don't have. So what they do, they come up with a plan. They start raising money to fund this trip, and they make a deal with a group called the London Company. And the London Company is some investors who are going to give these people some money to get them started, but they want something in exchange. They're willing to pay for the Pilgrim's trip to America, but anytime someone gives you money, it's probably not free. In return, the Pilgrims could settle on the land that the London Company chooses. So they're saying, we'll pay for the Pilgrim's trip, but you got to live where we tell you. You also have to work for 7 years and give all of your profits back to the London Company. So for 7 years, all the hard work you're doing, they're getting the money from it. After the 7 years is over, then you can do whatever you want. Giving up 7 years of your life is a big commitment back then. The average life expectancy is only like 45. So 7 years is a big chunk of your life. But regardless, they accept this deal and they take a trip. It's a little bit over 2 months to get here on their boat called the Mayflower. What happened is they actually ended up getting blown off course by a storm, and they already broke this first rule. They didn't land where they were supposed to. And basically what they said is since they broke that first rule already, they were going to kind of forget about some of the other rules the London Company set up. They decided to set up their own rules and their own form of government because they already were not where the London Company wanted them, so they said, we're going to make our own rules. They elected a guy named John Carver to be their leader, but John Carver didn't make it very long. He died. Then they chose a guy named William Bradford. He was their leader for the next 30 years, and they wanted to make the way they chose leaders a little bit more fair. They decided to make decisions by majority rule, and that basically meant they were going to vote, and whatever most people wanted is what they were going to do. This was called the Mayflower Compact. So the Mayflower Compact was the set of rules the Pilgrims made. So this was a major event. This was the first time that a European country had set up their own government in America. The Mayflower Compact couldn't solve all the problems the Pilgrims were getting into, though. It gave them some rules and some guidelines, but they did not realize how much they'd bitten off. The land they had chosen was not good for growing crops. It was terrible for it. They also had very, very strict rules about religion. So they came here so they could practice religion as they wanted, but they were very strict and they didn't want to let outsiders in. So if you guys know there's a teacher at school that's got the most strict rules, a lot of people don't like going to that class because it's too strict. There's too many different things they have to follow. Same thing was happening to the Pilgrims. Since their rules were so strict, not a lot of people wanted to come and live in their colony. So the Puritans are similar to the Pilgrims. The king is treating them unfairly, just like the Pilgrims were. They were getting treated unfairly because of their religious beliefs. They were being put in jail and they were being persecuted just because they were a different type of Christian. So they decided they were going to leave too. They didn't want to go to jail. They didn't want to be killed for believing the wrong thing. So just like the Pilgrims, they said, we're going to get ready and we're going to go to America too. They started working with a company called the Massachusetts Bay Company. And they set up a colony. Well, they wanted to go set up a colony. They had about 1,000 people ready to go. There were merchants, there were doctors, there were teachers, there were lawyers, and they spent a long time getting supplies ready. They didn't want to be caught off guard and ill-prepared. So they were very ready for this trip because they knew how hard it was going to be. They landed in Boston, Massachusetts. They chose a guy named John Winthrop to be their governor. And within a couple years, their colony had gone from 1,000 people to 10,000 people. So they were much more successful because they were more prepared. But just like the Pilgrims, they had very strong religious beliefs, and they did not give religious freedom to people coming in. If you were going to live with the Puritans, you had to do the same thing they did and believe the same religion. So they were suffering from part of the same thing the Pilgrims were. It was hard for them to attract outsiders because they don't want to follow these strict rules. Okay guys, so that's it. I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter today. So you need to go into Google Classroom and you are going to work on the worksheet for Chapter 3, Lesson 2.